How do you accidentally stuff yourself inside of a burn barrel and then sink to the bottom of a pond on your own property? Because that's what police are saying happened to her, and I am not convinced. Let's talk about the mysterious death of Debbie Wolfe, otherwise known as the body in the barrel. So on December 25th, 1985, 28-year-old Debbie finished her shift as a nurse at a local hospital in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She left around 4 p.m. and was likely headed to her isolated cabin about 4 miles from the city. She lived in the cabin alone, and although it was pretty desolate and heavily wooded, she had her 2 dogs to keep her company. She was supposed to go back to work the next morning at 8, but she never showed, and she never called either. This was especially odd because Debbie literally never missed work. She was super reliable and always on time, but that morning, nobody could get into contact with her, which worried her family. So her mom and a family friend drove to her cabin, and immediately upon arriving, they felt like something was wrong. Debbie was known to be extremely tidy and neat, but when her family got to her cabin, it was an absolute mess. First off, her dogs were running loose in the front yard, which Debbie never allowed, and they also hadn't been fed yet, which was unusual. Beer cans were littered all over the place, and it wasn't even a beer that Debbie was known to drink either. Adding to the mystery was the fact that Debbie's car was parked in a different spot than usual, and the front driver's seat was pushed all the way back. Keep in mind, Debbie was only 5'3", so this would have been way too far back for her to drive. So immediate red flags, right? Well, it only got worse when they went inside the cabin. It looked as if things had been thrown around inside, and her work uniform was laying on the kitchen floor. Her purse wasn't in its typical spot by the front door, but instead it was shoved into a tight spot under her bed. A light was blinking on her answering machine, indicating that she had a voicemail, and when her family played it, it sent chills down their spine. The voicemail was left earlier that morning, and it was from a man at the hospital Debbie worked at. It wasn't from her boss, though. Instead, it was from a volunteer who called to ask how she was doing. The man goes on to say that Debbie had missed several days of work and he was worried about her, but her family knew right away that this was not true. In fact, Debbie had only missed a few hours of work at this point, as she was just there the day before. So obviously her mom became extremely worried, and the two began looking for Debbie outside the cabin and near the pond on her property, but they didn't find anything. They tried to report her missing to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, but they told her that she had to wait 72 hours to file a report. So 3 days came and went, but it would take police 5 days just to get involved. So already not off to a good start. When police searched Debbie's cabin, they didn't find anything either, and they even brought in bloodhounds. They told her family that there was no need to search the pond because they could see the bottom, and clearly there was no body in the water. It seemed like the police honestly just didn't care, so Debbie's mom hired her own set of divers, and what they found is bizarre. The divers, along with Debbie's family friends, started wading through the water, and about 2 minutes in, they found what looked to be 2 sets of footprints and drag marks into the pond. When they went underwater, they immediately saw a 55-gallon burn barrel at the bottom, and stuffed inside, head first, was Debbie. Police were called back to the scene, but this is where things start to not add up. Debbie was dressed in clothes that weren't hers, including a men's jacket, a Pittsburgh Steelers t-shirt, pants that were way too long, a bra that was 3 sizes too big, and she had men's shoes on. So this is already odd, but adding to the mystery is the fact that there were no signs of foul play on her body at all. And after an autopsy was conducted, only half a teaspoon of water was found in Debbie's lungs. But even after all of this suspicious evidence, the medical examiner ruled that Debbie must have drowned, and it was all an accident. No drugs or alcohol were found in her system either. The police came up with the theory that Debbie must have been playing outside with her dogs that day and accidentally fell in the water. But this doesn't really make sense to me considering that she was found in 5.5 feet of water, about 30 feet from the bank of the pond. Now, to kind of paint a picture, the water surrounding the edge of this pond was only about an inch or 2 deep, and it very gently sloped down to the deepest part of the pond. For the most part, it was pretty much just knee deep unless you went extremely far out. So if she was playing with her dogs that day and just accidentally fell in, how did she end up 30 feet from the bank? She was known to be a good swimmer too, so I feel like if she fell in, she would have been able to get out pretty easily. But here's what's odd. As the investigation continued, police began denying that Debbie was found in a barrel, and they pretty much said that it never existed. When her mom double-checked with the divers and the family friend, they all said 100% she was found in a barrel, but they left it there, expecting the police to pick it up that day as evidence. But by the next morning, the barrel had vanished. Authorities said that the divers must have just thought that they saw a barrel, when really it was probably just Debbie's jacket they saw. They said that it must have just puffed up from the angle that she was laying at the bottom of the pond, making it look like a barrel. But Debbie's mom was not buying what they were telling her, and she even remembered that Debbie used to store her firewood in a burn barrel just like the one described, but when she went to go look for it at the cabin, it wasn't there. But what was there were the indents of the barrel, like it had recently been moved. Police say Debbie's death was accidental, but her mom believes that she was murdered, specifically by one of the men who volunteered at the hospital. Not long before Debbie died, she had told her family that a volunteer at her job wanted to date her. her, but she rejected the guy and said that they would be better off as friends. This man was reportedly interviewed the day her body was found, but was let go. And after refusing to take a polygraph test, he left town for good. It's weird to me that he left that voicemail for Debbie that day. It kind of seems like an alibi to me, trying to cover his tracks. Debbie's mom believes that she was murdered in her cabin, put inside the barrel to make it easier to roll to the pond, and then dropped in. She thinks the killer then returned to the site after the fact to take the barrel, since it was never found, as a way to make her death look accidental. There are just so many things about this case that point to it being a homicide. For starters, if what police are saying is true, that she was never in a barrel and just in the water, why was her body and the clothes she had on completely clean? You would think that if she had been in the water for 6 days that she would be covered in debris, or at least have insect bites or something, but she was completely clean. The beer cans scattered in her yard were never tested for DNA either, so either the police really dropped the ball or they're trying to cover something up. And because Debbie's death was ruled an accident, all of her records have since been destroyed. It's now been 39 years, and whatever happened to Debbie that cold winter day remains a mystery.